All right. Hello, everybody. Just a quick update about surgery. Everything went well with surgery. Instead of 2 weeks on crutches like I had originally thought, I have 6 weeks on crutches, non weight bearing, which means I can't drive, can't really do anything on my own in terms of getting out of the house for pretty much the rest of the summer, which is a bummer. But there's still a lot of things to look forward to, like catching up on the movies I need to see, getting really familiar with the couch, things of that nature. This is my second go at recording this presentation. The first one was way too long, and I realized I'm an ummer. I say almost every other word. So this one, I'm going to try to not say as much, but if I do, remember that I am an ummer. So here we go. This presentation is on the Ruler SEL program. It's currently headed by Mark Brackett, that handsome guy in the suit off to the right there, out of Yale University. It has kind of an ambiguous date of origin. My best guess is the mid 2000s. That's when Mark Brackett took the reins of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, mid early 2000s. And that's my best guess for when the Ruler program got its start, at least how it looks right now. The Ruler program is inspired, or was inspired, initially by a 1970s emotional literacy program that was also started at Yale. And more recently, it was inspired by the findings of these two guys, Peter Salovey and John Mayer, who discovered emotional, or who coined the term emotional intelligence. Peter Salovey studied the link between emotions and behavior, and John Mayer studied the link between emotions and thought. And so when they put their heads together, they came up with this idea of emotional intelligence and how valuable emotional intelligence is in someone's everyday life, interacting with others, interacting with yourself, and how people who are really strong in emotional intelligence tend to be more successful in their everyday life. And why was Ruler created? Well, it was created to teach emotional intelligence in schools to both adults who are working in schools, working with students, as well as the students themselves. More importantly, who are actually in the schools and who benefit the most from learning about emotional intelligence. So, scope, focus, audience. Ruler is primarily concerned with emotional intelligence, and I'm not going to tell you what Ruler stands for yet, but when I do, you'll realize that it really has everything to do with emotion. And it's focused on adults and students learning emotional intelligence. It's typically implemented as an entire school in the K through 8 level, and you'll see just the nature of the activities and the nature of the program. It really makes sense to do it as an entire school, as opposed to just an individual teacher piloting it, or another different way to incorporate SEL programs. And they've been exploring expanding into preschool and high school, which is great for having a program that spans the entire length of a student's education. And the Ruler program specifically, the Ruler program in the services that they offer primarily targets adults because they really focus on training adults through their professional development on the tools and the resources and the strategies of Ruler. And then these adults take it to the classroom and teach students and teach other adults about what they've learned. So the initial focus is really on educating adults about emotional intelligence and about the program, and then it sort of gets infused throughout the school from there. Our favorite word, mode of infusion. It's really, and I said this already, it's really primarily focused on that initial professional development. But then once the administrators, teachers, staff have been trained in Ruler, then there's two different ways that it gets infused into schools. The first is, and this is phase one, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The first is through general instructional practices and resources that any teacher can use in their classroom. There's 4 of these specifically that we'll talk about. And then the second step, and this is phase 2 in the program that we'll talk about as well, is they have these lesson plans that can be integrated into any classroom, although specifically they're usually integrated into an English language arts classroom because it really emphasizes it's really places an emphasis on the words around emotion, which really fits into that English language arts perspective. As you can see in this diagram below, there's a couple of different ways what Ruler uh, gets its message out and into the school community. It trains the teachers, leaders, staff. It's got curriculum and resources for students, and then the one that I'm not as clear about is the program for families. I wasn't able to find anything specifically that detailed how do they reach out to families, but they claim that there's also that community component and family component to the program. And what they say, and we'll talk about this as well, and towards the end of the presentation, is that the Ruler program enhances emotional literacy skills. It enhances the emotional climate of the classroom, school, and home communities. It also increases academic performance, relationship qualities, and health and well-being of students. So here we go, the moment you've all been waiting for. What does Ruler actually stand for? It's really an acronym, and you'll see every single one is specifically focused on emotions. First, it focuses on recognizing emotions in students or in oneself and in others. Then you want to understand where emotions come from. You want to be able to label emotions. You want to be able to express your emotions appropriately. And then you want to be able to regulate your emotions effectively. And all of these are really specifically tied to that emotional intelligence piece. And so one of the limitations of this program is that it doesn't quite get at that social piece of social emotional learning. However, a lot of these could be extended to social situations, such as expressing emotions appropriately and understanding causes and consequences of emotions specifically can be kind of extended into that social realm when you're talking to students about emotions. That's what Ruler stands for. Now, Ruler's broken up into 3 main components. This is how it's advertised to people who are looking to take up and implement the Ruler program. It's got 3 phases, and each phase really corresponds to a year. So phase 1 corresponds to year 1, phase 2 corresponds to year 2, and phase 3 corresponds to year 3 and beyond. Phase 1 is what they call anchors of emotional intelligence. And the primary characteristics of this phase are teachers and staff in the school are getting trained on what is emotional intelligence, what does it look like, and there's a focus on these 4 activities that you can see at the bottom here: the charter, the mood meter, the meta moment, and the blueprint. And I'll go into each of those specifically, kind of an overview of each one. I won't go into them super in depth because we don't have time, but there'll be resources on or in my resource folder for you to check those out. Phase 2 or year 2 is when that feeling words curriculum gets implemented. And this is really a formal curriculum that you could put in place in an English language arts class. It's got standalone lessons, it's got standalone parts of lessons, but it's really something that you can almost take directly from Ruler and put it in your classroom. Whereas those first 4 things, charter, mood meter, meta moment, and blueprint, are more things that you'd implement in your classroom in your own way, and it'd look very, very different from classroom to classroom, and they're more just resources to use. Then we have phase 3, and phase 3 is a little different. It's called self-sustainability, and this phase really is focused on the school taking the Ruler program and running with it and making it their own. In this phase, and I'll talk about this more specifically in a little bit, the teachers and the leaders of the school really take on that leadership role in training other teachers and adapting the program to fit their needs. So those are the three phases. More on each one to come. Since we've talked so much about how to successfully implement a socio-emotional learning plan program, this is their year one implementation plan for phase one. And I'll just hit on a couple of the main pieces. It starts by introducing the program to key stakeholders. Then, if they decide to move forward with Ruler, they train district and school leaders. And as we know, it's really important that leadership in a district or in a school is on board with whatever program it is so it can really become embedded in the culture. Then, once these key people have been trained, then individual teachers and staff become trained. So there's kind of this trickle down effect throughout the program. Then your classroom level teachers and school staff will begin to train students and families in the Ruler approaches, using the techniques and the plans and the curriculum and that sort of stuff that they've gotten from Ruler. And then number 7 here is really the most important one. And this is when, and it's kind of probably bigger than just this single step, but it's when Ruler really becomes integrated into all parts of the school: the mission, the curriculum, the policies, the language, just everything that's going on in the school has Ruler in it. And as we know from our readings, the most successful programs are ones that are really implemented and infused in the entire system that a student is going through: school, home, before and after school activities, everything. I'll go through this kind of quickly, just kind of an aside on how much it costs for the Ruler program. Phase 1, and you get a course on emotional intelligence, online course, and then a 2-day in-person training. Costs $6,000 per school for 3 people to attend. Phase 2, you get another 2-day in-person training, and it's $4,500 per school for another 3 participants. And so at a minimum, if you want to implement Ruler into your school, it's over $10,000. And then if you want to train more people from the Ruler program source, it's even more than that. But at a minimum, it's $10,000. So I would say cost is probably one of the big constraints to this program. So now I want to take a moment to go through the 5 main aspects of the Ruler program. And I think some of these are something that you can just take and run with in your own classroom right now. And some of them are things that you might need a little bit more structure and really need the entire Ruler program to be able to implement it into your classroom. The first one is what they call the charter. And so I'm going to read you an example of a classroom charter, and just so you have an idea of what it is. This example says, "We, the students and teachers of class V61, want to feel happy, excited, proud, cool, confident, respected, and safe. In order to feel this way, we must follow the rules, respect each other, treat others the way you want to be treated, forgive each other, and resolve conflicts peacefully. When we get upset, we promise to calm down by saying ABCs, playing with shapes, take a walk, take deep breaths, squeeze a stress ball, or draw." And so, as you can see, this is kind of like a classroom agreement. And it's almost like an interactive classroom rules list that you might have on the wall in your classroom, but it's really collaborative. It's really voiced in the community, in the community's words and community's opinions. You can see all the students and the teachers have actually signed this charter, and this could be a really valuable way to start the school year in kind of a collaborative rule making, document making thing to start off the year. I think it would be a really good way to build community. And so that's the first thing that gets incorporated in the Ruler program during that first year. Second, and I think this one's really interesting because of all of the different applications that you could use this for. But the second thing is called the mood meter. And it's really, from what I've seen, you can either, there's actually an app for it that you could have on your phone, which we'll talk about briefly. But it also could just be a graphic that you put on your wall, and it's really a visual way to show someone how you're feeling. And once I click on this on the app, you'll actually see what the criteria are for where you put your dot, and then depending on where you put your dot is indicative of what emotion you're currently feeling, or a good way to maybe predict what emotion you're feeling. And so this is again another way to start conversations about emotion, get students to start thinking about their own emotions. So let's take a look at the app. So this app is kind of interesting to me, but the first thing you do is you plot your feeling. And if you look over here, the two criteria are if you're feeling pleasant or unpleasant. That's the first category. And then if your energy is high or low. And so depending on those two factors and where you place your dot in this diagram over here, you would get an output of a different emotion. And so I imagine this, at least at the elementary school level, is really powerful for students who are still exploring new emotions and who maybe can identify if they feel good or bad and if they feel energetic or not energetic. But then they can actually put a name to the emotion that they're feeling. And now this specific app takes it a couple steps further. It asks students to describe why they have that feeling, doing some self-awareness stuff with emotion. Then it takes it even one step further, building a strategy to shift your emotion if it's an undesirable emotion that you're feeling at that time. And I imagine that the app on the phone has a bunch of different possibilities that it gives to you, and you pick the one that is most applicable to you. It prints out a report or shows you a report of how you've been feeling, and you can select an entire day or a week or a month or a year and see how your different emotions compare to each other. And then, of course, since it's an app, you can click share and share it on all your social media if you want to tell everybody how motivated you're feeling, as in this example, or how calm you're feeling, or whatever you're feeling. You can share it on social media. So that is the mood meter. Let's see how I'm doing on time here. Okay, so I'm gonna speed up just a little bit. Third thing is called the meta moment, and I think this is actually a really critical and useful tool for a lot of students. And the main thing is that this is just a strategy for how to deal with anything that happens to you. Um, and so, really, what the meta moment is all about, and you can take a look at this diagram, but it's really about how can you react to a situation most effectively. And so, and this is from the website, a couple of questions I'm going to read you. Really, what they want students to think about is how would their best self react in a situation like this? And what strategy can they use so that their actions reflect their best self? And I think this is really important language about whatever situation that you're in. If you take a step back and you think about what would your best self do in this situation, and you're able to kind of distance yourself, take on a meta view of what's really going on, and analyze the situation, decide how your best self would respond, then you're probably going to do something more rational, more beneficial to you than if you just act impulsively. Next is the blueprint, and this is probably the one that needs the most structure and scaffolding if you're going to use this in your classroom. But essentially, it's a conflict mediation strategy that asks you, and if you look over here, you can see these questions, but essentially it asks you to recognize what you're feeling, put a label to it, understand why you're feeling it, and then how can you express it in an appropriate way, and how can you regulate your emotions in an appropriate way. And it gives some questions and sentence starters down here that you might want to use. And again, this is all going to be in that resource folder if you want to look into it a little bit more. But this is really just a strategy to negotiate conflict within yourself or with another person or with another adult at the school, and just having some common language and steps to go through while deciding what emotions were actually present during a conflict or when something was going on. Next, and this is phase 2, that's year 2. So all those other ones are really the informal strategies that you could incorporate into your own classroom right now if you wanted to. This one is really more of a formal curriculum. And really what the Feeling Words curriculum is all about is developing student language about emotions. And so from my understanding of the program, what this looks like is a teacher will present students with a certain emotion, or they'll give a scenario in which a fictional character experiences a certain emotion, or they'll show a video, or they'll pick someone in class who's feeling strongly about something. And then as an entire class, they kind of unpack what's going on with that emotion, and they develop a common language, and they develop tools to regulate that emotion and understand really what's going on. But the whole curriculum is really about understanding and putting words in students' mouths about what they're feeling. And like I said before, this comes in either prepackaged lessons or you can pull from it. But the ruler program's pretty protective about this, and I wasn't really able to find many specifics. They seem to kind of keep it on lockdown until you really get involved with the curriculum, and you pay for their professional development and stuff like that. So phase three, and this is really kind of the and beyond piece of what's going on with the ruler program. After you've had 2 years of implementing the program as either a small group of teachers or as an entire school, then phase three is really about that scale up piece of implementation, and it's really putting the onus on the teachers who have been using Ruler, and it encourages those teachers to train other teachers and staff about what they're doing in their classrooms. What is Ruler all about? What is emotional intelligence all about? And so they're kind of using the trainers, train other people um, approach to spreading the Ruler program. In this year, Ruler really becomes the norm at the school in the climate, because faculty, administrators, staff, students, families are all bought into the program, and they're all using common language, and they're using common activities, and students see the same stuff on their teachers' walls, and they're participating in the same sorts of activities. So it really becomes just normal for students. And then the Ruler staff, like the actual Ruler program, continues to consult um, schools and districts depending on what they need, or any conflicts that might arise, or any suggestions for how to adapt the program to their specific school. But this phase three is really about schools taking the program and making it their own. So I won't go through every single one of these, but in all of my research about the Ruler program, the biggest thing that they say is that it's aligned with socio-emotional learning theory. It's aligned with how to successfully implement socio-emotional learning programs. And so what I did was I went through all of the guidelines in our text promoting social and emotional learning guidelines for educators, the Elias text, and I just picked out some of the guidelines that really I think corresponded with the Ruler program. Uh, just a couple. Maybe I'll pick one from each one. Guideline 2. The Ruler program really helps students cope with ongoing life events, since it's so focused on emotion, and since everyone's feeling emotion at every time during the day. The Ruler program is really giving students opportunities to access what's going on in their life every single day that they're a part of the Ruler program. Professional development is a really big piece, and I think it aligns with the guidelines really well. Teachers learn the actual theoretical knowledge and how to use emotional intelligence and these skills for themselves, and then they go out and they teach students, other adults, and they get feedback from each other. They interact with each other. It really turns into a entire community that's focused on helping each other understand emotion. And really it starts with the actual adults and the leadership behind the program learning about how do they navigate their own emotions, and how can strategies that they use work for students. And then lastly, implementation piece. It combines school, students, community input in a lot of different ways. Again, I wasn't sure how specifically they use community input, but they claim that they do. And so in that way, I think it's really a good program because It's top down. They really want the entire school, entire district, and the leadership to embrace these emotional intelligence ideas. And then that trickles down to students and staff and other adults in the building. But really, I think Ruler is pretty well aligned with these guidelines. Next, just a couple things about effectiveness. I thought this was kind of funny. If you click on the evidence piece of the Ruler website, the biggest thing that pops up is a bunch of pictures. And so the first thing that I thought to myself is, what the heck do all of these mean? And then I started clicking on the actual picture. And so if you look at this first picture, what they're really getting at in this picture is that the Ruler program demonstrates increasingly supportive administration. So I don't know how from this picture you can guess that that's increasingly supportive administration, but it does. And they have about like 20 of these on this page. And so I don't know, you can click on any of them really, and the website is again linked in the resource folder. But you might be thinking to yourself, what does this one mean? Well, hey, reduce social stress is one of the outcomes of the Ruler program, and they've got a lot of these. And so I don't know how they're able to prove that they have all of these outcomes, but they claim that they do. And then interestingly, over here, these 5 articles are really the only 5 articles that I could find about Ruler's effectiveness and studies about the Ruler program. And all my searching of Google, these were the articles that just kept popping up. And so similar to a lot of other programs, they're promoting research that shows that they're effective. And so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But from their studies, what they have found is that schools and classrooms that use Ruler demonstrate higher year-end grades and higher teacher ratings. Students demonstrate higher year-end grades, and then teachers also rate their students as having higher socio-emotional competence. They've also noticed higher degrees of warmth and connectedness between teachers and students, and students demonstrate more positive characteristics such as autonomy, leadership, and less bullying behaviors. And then in another article, it says that classrooms and schools that use Ruler demonstrate improved emotional support for their students, improved instructional support for their students, and improved classroom organization. And again, both of these articles were highly influenced by Brackett, the guy who's kind of heading Ruler. So of course they're going to have highly positive views of what Ruler of the outcomes of Ruler. This is from the actual CASEL website, and it's really only one study of 273 students, and in grades 5 and 6, and it shows the same sort of effectiveness, improved academic performance, increased positive social behavior, and then as it's kind of their secondary findings, improved academic behaviors and improved climate. So really the research out there is really positive for Ruler, but it's not extensive, and it's not from a variety of sources. It's really internal from them. And then lastly about Ruler, a couple of benefits and constraints. Now there's a lot more that could be added to this list, but these are just a few of the ones that came to mind first for me. Some of the benefits: professional development is huge with Ruler, and so teachers are really learning the skills first, and then they're helping their students. And so essentially this is kind of teaching students socio-emotional competence, like we talked about last week in class. All of the materials are fairly straightforward. The 5 things that we talked about are really the 5 components of the program, and some of them can kind of be used standalone, and some of them you need a little extra support, but it's not a super complicated program. It's really aligned with research and guidelines, as we talked about, and this is a benefit and a constraint, but it's got a really clear and concise focus, and that's on emotion. And so that it's nice for teachers and nice for schools that there's really this targeted approach, but it might leave out some pieces of socio-emotional learning, and that's this first point over here. Another constraint is you really need school-wide buy-in. It's kind of tough to um, just be an individual teacher piloting the program because the students are kind of isolated in their language, and you're trying to develop a community that's based on um, a community that's only from your one classroom that doesn't really get all the support and the benefits of having an entire school or district buy into the program. And it's really expensive to do the professional development. And then we already talked about this as well. It hasn't been rigorously researched or proven by outside or non-biased sources. All right, those are the things in my resource folder. Just some links that I found helpful um, for me, some videos of Ruler in action, and some articles about the effectiveness. And those are the sources that I used for this. Thank you very much, everybody, for giving this a listen. I'm gonna try my best to make it to class tomorrow for the very end, for the very last day. But other than that, thank you very much.